We want to welcome you guys to our first Missions Emphasis Sunday. We've got 2 Sundays where we're going to be talking about developing and growing our missionaries. And our speaker this morning is Pastor Art Nakamara from Foothill Bible Church. Art is quite literally my missions guru. We've had quite a relationship with them over the years, and we've come alongside to support the Jensens in Canada. And so we're excited to have Art here. Let's go ahead and welcome Pastor Art Nakamura.
Well, thank you. It is good to be here. It was a tremendous privilege to be here last weekend for the marriage conference, and we had a large contingency from Foothill coming out here to be exhorted, encouraged, and I trust that this weekend as well, as Mike noted, we've had a long-standing relationship, our pastoral staff along with theirs, the elder board. And it's been sweet because just the exchange of ideas. We are indebted in many ways, spiritually indebted to Cornerstone Fellowship Bible Church. Just the formation of the small group. I think of Carlos Limtiaco and his just blessing us. Mike on counseling and missions, Milton and just preaching, and so I can just go down the list of the elder board. They have just been a sweet fellowship of encouraging and stirring one another to love and good works. Let me open up in a word of prayer. Father, I ask that you would guide our time and cause us to be profitable, helpful to understand the role of the local church in missions. We are grateful that we can be part of this enterprise of making Christ known throughout the world, for you are worthy to receive glory and honor, and we thank you in Christ's name. Amen. So I want to kind of give a quick intro to help kind of set the stage to ask that question, how are missionaries developed? I grew up in a non-Christian home, a Japanese Buddhist home, and I didn't hear the gospel till my first year at the University of Washington. And I was exposed to a Bible-believing church that believed in the supporting of missionaries, that over 50% of their budget went to supporting missionaries. So there was an early formation and influence of the role of the local church in supporting missionaries. I thought, I didn't finish my degree at the University of Washington. I actually transferred to Biola and went there with that purpose to get trained for becoming a missionary. And God providentially brought Kim in my life, and we've been married for the past almost 35 years. And so that's been a blessing. But as a family, we were sent out to India from Foothill Bible Church in 2000. And prior to that, I was working in the corporate world, primarily because going to a closed country, I was advised that I should work in the corporate world to understand, to go in the platform of not a seminary grad, but working in the working world. And that counsel was very helpful for me because I thrived in both arenas and the elders sent us out to make Christ known in India. We were serving there for a little over 5 years, and the elder board approached me and said, "We'd like you to come back." And now we had not prepared for that. We believe that the local church sends out missionaries. What do you do when they say they want you back? And the purpose that they asked me to return, and eventually all of my family, was so that we would train a future generation. The Lord has been kind in allowing that purpose to come to fruition. As Mike noted, that Promise Vaughn, who serves in Papua New Guinea, and Leif and Kathy Jensen, who serve in Ottawa, Canada, French-speaking Canada, are some of the ones that we've had the privilege to equip and train and support. And there's been others in terms of church planting as well as missionary endeavors. And so we count it a privilege, and we really value and see the wisdom of the role of the local church in the development and the sending and the equipping and the supporting of missionaries. And so the question again, how are missionaries developed? And that's evidence that we were there at one time. We looked a little younger then. But how does one become a missionary? And is it a case of just go out there, just do it? You're inspired and you hear a great message. You hear from John Piper about let the nations be glad, and you say, or you go to some spiritual conference and you say, yes, I want to make my life count, and you just go. Is that how one becomes a missionary? And I think oftentimes historically, especially in the last 50 plus years, there's been a movement where people find themselves moved by perhaps a message or a theme where this idea of being sacrificial. I think of Romans 12, just in view of God's mercy upon one's life, I want to make my life a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. So you say, here am I, send me, kind of the Isaiah 6. But I would say that is such a common movement, but sadly, it's perhaps misplaced in that missions without the role of the local church, it really falls short. And sadly, we were able to see some of the fallout when there isn't the role of the local church providing the support and the counsel on the field. Because once you're out there, there is a sense of, okay, I'm here amongst people who don't know me, I don't know them, I got to learn the language, culture, what do I do next? And if you don't have that sense of being supported and understand the equipping and the time that it took to prepare you, you find yourself exposed, and we saw the number of people return from the field. So it really leads to what is that role of the local church in relation to the fulfillment of the Great Commission? And this morning I hope to just answer that. I have a lot of information. You have a handout, and I do have about a bit of information just to understand the nature of a missionary. And we believe that the Great Commission is Jesus' command to make disciples. We believe in Matthew 28, and we're saying yes, but the emphasis is the making of disciples, whether it's in Riverside or beyond. As you are going, you are called to do that. But what I hope to establish this morning is the premise that missionaries are not people who go out independently or on their own volition to preach the gospel, but rather they are called and they are sent by God, using the local church as that means of fulfilling the Great Commission. Since the local church is that historical means for ones called to assemble, we see in Acts 2, they came to assemble, to worship, to pray, to have fellowship. We believe similarly that the historical means of fulfilling the Great Commission is that local church is equipping and then doing the sending part. And so I want to establish that. I noted on the outline a number of passages, but I want us to read just one portion. And you can look on your own. Those are just passages I just noted. But let me just read this portion of Romans 10. You're familiar with Romans 10, just Paul gives this great epistle of God's justification of how he's called out people for his own. And in chapter 10 there, he notes here in verse 13, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on him whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. And historically, God has brought forth a message from his word, and we believe that the mode is through community. So there's a message, a messenger, and then there's a means of someone needing to send out to affirm that. In the book of Acts, Luke records the whole church of Jerusalem and Antioch serving as that sending agency on missionaries. Luke records just that whole major transition in Acts 11. Again, I may be talking a bit fast, so if we were in a little more intimate, slow down or raise questions, and I could feel those questions. But this large, expansive room, I go, Okay, I'm going to just give a lot of information, but hopefully maybe during the lunch or afterwards I can field questions. But what I want to establish is that historically, biblically, that even as Luke records in the book of Acts, that there is a process of identifying people who have already demonstrated a level of skill to articulate the truths in meeting the needs throughout the known world at that time, around from Antioch and from Jerusalem and onwards. And the church in Antioch not only became that teaching center, but a catalyst and sending body to meet not only spiritual but physical needs as well. And so in looking at Acts 11, verse 25 onwards, you can see some of that account. Again, noting that just that overview of that local church sending Barnabas and Saul, later named Paul, to minister to fellow saints in Judea who were suffering from famine. And you see later, not only in Acts 11, but you see in Acts 13, in the first 5 verses, just again, the Holy Spirit calling out Paul and Barnabas to be sent out to preach the gospel. And you see the role of the church in Jerusalem in Acts 15, kind of giving an account of the reports that they're seeing Gentiles coming to faith. And you see this interaction between the one who is sent out, the missionary, and the one who's doing the sending, the local church. There's a relationship, an ongoing relationship. It wasn't a case of, hey, I just want to go on my own and do my own thing. As zealous and good intention that could be, the idea of being sent out has a sense of a level of responsibility for the sender. And that's where I'm kind of going to emphasize that the local church really decides on the ministry priorities. And I say that's really critical because when the elders, whether it's here at Cornerstone or at Foothill, there's a determination of what are the needs in our world and whom do we send and what are our priorities. And that because the variety of ministry needs under the topic of missions covers a number of arenas. So we've had people come to me and say, Art, I feel God has called me to Argentina or to China or wherever. And I appreciate the desire expressed. Maybe they were just compelled. They met someone or they read about the plight of the lost and recognizing, without the gospel, without Christ. And that was critical even for my own spiritual development to understand that there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be what? Saved. Right. There's only one mediator between God and man. The man whom? Christ Jesus. And so knowing that there's only one way, one person, and it requires, as I read there in Romans 10, it requires a messenger to herald forth that truth. And the church needs to decide, okay, where are we going to focus and whom are we going to send? And that takes prayer and consideration of whom and how we're going to do that. And so missions and a missionary, there's a notion out there that everyone is a missionary. I would politely disagree. Not everyone is a missionary, because missionary by definition is one who is sent out for a specific purpose. And I would say that the role of the local church plays in identifying those individuals, whether it be male, female, married, single, in identifying and then sending out. So for us, the whole arena of a balance between, we believe in evangelism, making Christ known among the lost. That is one of the roles. But we also see the role of edification. So 50% of our budget towards missions reflects on evangelism, and the other 50% in edification. And in breaking it down, what we've done, and this is descriptive of Foothill Bible Church. This is not necessarily prescriptive of saying this is what you must do. But it just gives you an idea how we were processing that. We recognize, okay, we want to we want to send people who can make Christ known, and we also want to equip. We see there are men and women who are gifted to equip men and women. I think you guys are supporting Promise, and she's trying to finish. She's translating the 1 Corinthians, but she was recently this week she was noting just translating some nuances of Revelation chapter 4 and 5, and I was just marveling that here's a single gal. We've known her since she was in her mid-teens, and I remember the desire. She said, I believe God has called me, and we were all thinking, wow, we hope. We from a physical standpoint, stature, we thought, she doesn't look much, but I can't measure her heart. And you can't measure. And to see one who is devoted, and she has proven, and I'll kind of go over a process of what we identified as, here's a person who really believes not only in the power of the gospel, but she wanted to be willing to make Christ known. So I say 50% of our overall missions budget is supporting the ministry of Bible translation, in which she does, and church planting and evangelism. So here's a single gal. She's not a church planter, but she supports the work of church planting by making the scriptures known in that local language among the Tongva peoples. And it's really a privilege to see that coming to fruition. She came back several months ago and said, okay, how much, what's the percentage right now? And said 49.6% of the New Testament. I said, not bad in the first 10 years, But it's amazing. Just the God is using her, and they're just the people seeing the fruit of reading the scriptures together. We also recognize that 30%, I don't know how that, of the overall budget is supporting the training of indigenous leaders and church leadership. So we support others who are doing the equipping of the saints. And then 20% of the overall budget is directed towards support ministries, because there are the needs, whether it's medical missions or aviation, there are significant roles, and we recognize there are different gifts that people have. Not everyone is a Bible translator or an evangelist. There are people who do a great job of equipping and training or counseling. And so we had to determine, just in terms of priorities, of where of our budget, we have about 30% of our budget goes in supporting outreach ministries. And so how are we going to distribute, and whom are we going to distribute? So I'm going to direct the attention now just towards that identification. So you're establishing a philosophy of, okay, there's some priorities, but what qualities do you look for in a person, of a candidate? Certainly, we recognize they have to have the elder qualifications. Now, I noted Promise, she's a single gal. She could not be an elder, and there's a certain provision that we wanted to see for her, because we see the role of women in ministry in places, and historically in missions, they have played a significant role in the work of fulfilling the Great Commission. And I can go on off that topic, but just recognizing there is a significant role women play. We've seen that in the book of Acts, of just the first European convert in Lydia, and how she played a significant role in this formation of the first church in Europe, and hosting. And you see other women prominent who serve well. And so we don't want to diminish that role. But we do look for biblical qualifications of character and competence, but that character is non-negotiable, that they need to be of proven character, above reproach. And so 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 gives us a list of not only the aspiration, but really we're not looking for perfection, but we're looking for direction. Where are they showing faithful? And so I have an acronym, and some of you are familiar with the acronym of FAT, faithful, available, teachable. And that's what we're looking for in a mature Christian. I've kind of tweaked that term or the acronym FAT to faith. And I'll kind of break it down of what I mean by faithful, And I have a new word instead of available. I put abide, and initiator, teachable, and humble. What we look for in a candidate, and this is where the elders are recognizing, okay, there are men and women who God has gifted, who desire to be used in some significant way, perhaps vocational ministry. So what we're looking at, is this person faithful? Are they faithful in their responsibilities and current ministry responsibilities and calling? And we want to see a track record that they are ones who are servants, who are faithful servants. When you ask them to do something, they do it with excellence. They pursue, they're dependable and reliable. And so that idea of being faithful is something we say that's non-negotiable. I put abide, and it's really based on, instead of available, abiding is one, the context is John 15, after a person being pruned, how are they walking with Christ in the midst of times of testing? Because that's really a test of a mature believer, is how do they respond to adversity when life doesn't go the way they had hoped. And all of us have been tested and pruned in many ways. Sometimes we respond well, or others poorly. But what we're looking for is, again, not perfection, but direction of a person's life. Are they one who are abiding in Christ, that they see that apart from Christ, they can do nothing? And so they're characterized by one, that their devotion and their spiritual life is characterized that they are abiding in Christ. We're looking for a person who shows initiative, meaning they're an initiator. And what I mean by that is that, especially on the mission field, there's no one watching over your shoulders and seeing what you're doing. And we want to see a drive. And I was talking to Alvin just a few minutes before this morning's session and about sports analogies, but you can't measure, you can see athletes and see that they may have certain talents, but do they have a drive? Is there an initiative where they are self-disciplined, focused, and able to move forward when they're not just, when you show up, okay, I'll do my work, I'll do whatever I am told to do when people are watching. No, it's not when people are not watching. Because God is watching. But we're looking for that person who has that drive and initiative in making Christ known. That taking initiative is crucial. And in that taking initiative, that they are what I would call, they got to be this, not a loser, but a learner. Meaning that they are looking to, they're taking the initiative, and it really feeds to the next point of being teachable. That teachable is associated with being a learner, but it's one who constantly seeks that they haven't arrived. They're seeking to not only know the scriptures well, but knowing the people that they're serving. They're a person who listens well, who draws out, who wants to understand people's hearts, and in that process of being teachable, that they're willing to really leads to the next point of being humble. They're willing to even receive correction when they are wrong, or they're willing to admit when they have sinned against someone. And so we're looking for those characteristics of a person. Does that make sense? What I'm saying here is that we're looking for those we're looking for biblical qualifications, but we're looking for that individual who has these type of qualities. And how it's fleshed out, what we do as an elder board is we do a SWOT analysis, a strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. We're always looking at, okay, what is Art's strengths and weaknesses, and or Kim's? I mean, annually we try to do an evaluation of each other. But for future candidates, for missionary candidates, we're looking for, I don't want to say we're looking for a few good men, but we are looking for people who have, who are set apart, that there is something unique about them. The world may call them as foolish, as 1 Corinthians 1 and 2 knows, but there's something unique about this person that we identify. And I kind of put this up They're not on fill in the blanks. They're just things that we've over the years have seen that have really made a lot of sense. What we see is, do they have ownership of ministry, meaning that there's a sense of personal responsibility for the growth and success of a ministry that they're overseeing. So they take personal ownership, not personal pride, but personal ownership, that they find themselves responsible. Do they, are they ones who relates to the unchurched, meaning not just they're an evangelist, but do they have a heart for people who are lost, who don't know Christ, and they just gravitate, look for those kind of people. Even when they come to Cornerstone on Sunday mornings, they're looking for opportunity to meet and greet people. This is critical, the third point, spousal cooperation. Does, and I'm not talking about men but who are married, but is the wife on board? And the first thing, we interview the wives. We want to know, is the wife on board? If she's not on board, there's something that's going on. If you're trying to say, I believe God has called me to the mission field, and the wife is trailing, miles behind, and not there, there's somewhere of a disconnect. And so if you're not making disciples in the home, we would raise questions about that. Again, forgive me for talking fast. I'm looking at the clock and recognizing I have a lot of time. But I just, you can ask me later about that. We're looking for ones who effectively builds relationship, not tearing down, but seeking to. They are ones who are just building relationships because they see the value of people, and so they take the initiative in meeting people. They're committed to making disciples within the local church. Okay, that's critical. Yeah, I'm making disciples, but if it's independent of the local church, there's to me a disconnect, because to me the value of the local church is critical, because that is the means God has provided. He is building His church, and I don't want to go through the argument of universal church. The local church is what I'm. So what we're looking for is men and women who are seeking to make disciples. That they see men and women coming behind, and they want to pour into them because they've been entrusted with a responsibility or knowledge, and they want to pass it on, kind of a Titus 2 mentality. They're responsive to the community, that they know how to adapt to different cultures and community and just embrace it, not seeing it as a threat, but seeing it as, wow, I love all diversity of cultures and people. There's people who take note of changing cultures and they want to take flight. Missionaries are ones who go, no, we want to embrace, because this is what God is providentially doing in bringing people to Himself. And so they embrace that. And so that's what we're looking for, people who are responsive. They utilize the giftedness of others. They know how to delegate and encourage and exhort others to do the ministry. Am I making sense? Are you guys tracking with me? Again, I can just go on a number of these. Flexible and adaptable. I'm a big advocate that missionaries embrace ambiguity and flexibility. You just, you don't know what's coming your way, and you just embrace it because God has providentially orchestrated that He's made this day. I'm going to rejoice and be glad in it and just embrace all that He has for us that day. That's always a test, because there are times when last year we were in Uganda, and there was a Muslim pilgrimage that stalled and made us, we missed our flight. And okay, embrace flexibility and ambiguity, and there was just recognizing, okay, that was costly miss, but recognizing if God is sovereign over all things, we embrace those things. So those are some of the characteristics of a person that we are looking for. And in that, there's 4 important processes that the local church plays an important role. And I've noted it here, and I'll kind of briefly just give why these are critical. The whole issue of ordination, you know what ordination is? It's a public examining of an individual, of their knowledge of the Scriptures, and we have it as a formal process. We have other elders and pastors from around the community to come in. We recognize that pre-field training of the knowledge of the Scriptures is critical. But seminary is not the only way. We're not only looking for a person who may have seminary or Bible degree knowledge in order to be a missionary. That's helpful, but we see ordination is even more critical because it's something church-based and observable. So leading up to this, we saw the formation of the development of a training center. And the training center is to recognize men are gifted, and we got to understand how they're gifted, and we need to equip them. But how they test under fire, under duress, is what we're looking for. And ordination is kind of that built-in system of how do they handle the scriptures in a public setting. Because it gives us an indication, can they handle the scriptures in close quarters? I liken to, some of you have heard me say this, is preaching is like firing artillery. And teaching is infantry, just, but firing afar. Counseling, and many of you are counselors here, that's hand-to-hand combat. That's, you see a person in the raw and you're dealing with issues of life, of sin. And so what we're looking for and leading up to ordination is, can this person, man or woman, handle the scriptures? So it leads to the ordination process. The local church is identifying a mission agency. That means the local church generally can't do everything of the that a mission agencies provide. Mission agencies are means that God has provided where experienced missionaries, former missionaries, are there in establishing skills and training of skills, language, culture, adaptation, all those things mission agencies provide. And so for the local church to identify a good mission agency to work with, and recognizing that they play a valuable aid in helping the missionary. Both Leif and Kathy, and for Promise, their promises with Ethnos 360 and Leif and Kathy are with Biblical Ministries Worldwide. We saw the value of their mission organizations in assisting them in providing further training. We see the like-minded supporters, just discovering like-minded supporters. That means Leif and Kathy and Promise are from Foothill. But we saw the value of ministry partnership, and we are so grateful that Cornerstone has played an important role in supporting their ministries, not only financially but prayerfully, and just tangible ways that you guys have shown support by visitation, by encouragement, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. But it eases the burden of the local church assuming all the financial responsibilities. So finding like-minded supporters is really critical. Another is the commissioning service. And the commissioning service is that event where it's a special event of the life of the church, because that church sets aside that, okay, like in Acts 13, there was a moment of recognition of there are some men who've been set apart, Paul and Barnabas, to be set apart, to be used and later to the Gentile world. And that is a special season, a special time in history of the life of the church. And so we see that as our four critical events or processes that a local church, I don't want to say ought to, but I would encourage participation in that way. 3 practical ways. I got all these lists, forgive me, but I want to camp here a little bit. Is 3 practical ways for church members to participate in supporting Ascent One. Number 1, just to pray faithfully. And thank you again on behalf of Leif and Kathy and for Promise that you are one of those who are holding on to the rope. That illustration of holding on to the rope was a missionary to India named William Carey, who said, I'll go anywhere, even the deepest, darkest parts of India, if you would hold the rope. Kind of the illustration of a miner going down into a dark place. And if you're holding the rope, then I'll go. I'll be the one willing to make Christ known. You serve an integral part when you are praying for your missionaries. You and praying for them, interceding for them, because we found that there were moments of crisis or testings and trials in India, and we went, people are praying for us. We know that. We know that without their prayers, there would have been moments where we would have felt in despair or discouragement. And God is kind, using the timeliness of saints who would let us know that they're praying. And it leads to the second point, just to support joyfully, sacrificially, and creatively. I love the internet in this way, of creative ways of, whether it's through Zoom, through Facebook, through other means. We didn't have that. But the internet was just coming into India, and one missionary had little children, and the grandparents would kind of Zoom. It wasn't Zoom, but it was another way of reading children's hours on the internet. And I just thought, praise God. Years ago, making a phone call was just cost exorbitant. But to do that nowadays in real time, we're interfacing with different ones around the world constantly, and it's just sweet, especially in closed access countries. And we can find creative ways to communicate and still talk in generalities. We don't always say evangelism or conversions, or we don't use those words, but finding creative ways to encourage them, to let them know that they're being supported. But in supporting sacrificially, it's just gifts. I just remember different churches sending us a care package. Of course, the kids love any care package because they had candy or other stuff, But one idea was a directory, meaning people would submit pictures of their families, or small groups would gather and have pictures and little notes from their kids and from the family members, just introducing themselves, putting it into a book and sending it. For the missionary receiving it, it's like, wow, people care for us. They really love us, and they support. The final one is one that is dear to my heart, is remain steadfast. What I mean by that is the local church that serves as a stable and consistent support network provides a level of stability to the missionary who's out there. When they know that there are people they can count on when they come back, and they see you've been there, your marriages are thriving, you're steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. 1 Corinthians 15:56, just knowing that there are people here who've not only held the rope, but I can come back to, and there's a safety in knowing that they remember me. They've been caring for me. They've been loving me. And their marriages are intact. They're thriving. They're growing in the Lord. That is such a practical. So for you here, just remaining steadfast that way is a dear, dear blessing to the missionary, because they know that, okay, we're willing, because we know people behind us are interceding, caring for us, and their lives are being transformed by the work of the gospel as well. Milton Vincent's book, The Gospel Primer, was just so helpful for us as a church, because we needed to preach that gospel to ourselves. We needed the gospel just like those who've never heard. Those of us who have heard all the time, we need to be reminded of that same gospel. And the benefits for the local church, I think of Psalm 115, not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name we give glory, for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. I think of just the benefits of is the glory of God. Just seeing just promoting the glory of God is really one where we recognize that our worship is enhanced when we send out those from our very selves. I mean, they're people who are near and dear to us. And we believe sending our best, people who we raised, who we trained, who we loved, who we care, and they're part of us to make Christ known. There's a sweetness for the local church to be excited about that. So you pray and that God would raise forth other laborers into the harvest. And you recognize It's not for our glory. Because I think of the recipients. Think of the recipients. Those whom you are supporting. There are recipients who are now hearing, who have never heard the gospel. And this prospect becomes life-giving and soul-saving. To send from amongst the community of saints is the culmination of worship, and it requires faith in the only God who is able to rescue men who are lost, dead in their trespasses and sin. When we were visiting Promise, Kim and I were there in Papua New Guinea, and I am not a village person. But to see when the men, the elders said, thank you, you would send someone who would come, who would impart their lives to make the scriptures known. Thank you for that sacrifice. And it does wonders for us as a local body to know that we're not sending just send them away type of people. We're sending people who are near and dear to us because God has gifted and set them apart. And so I pray that for Cornerstone, you may have the continual privilege of equipping, sending, and supporting those who have been set apart for that purpose. And so we count it a privilege to be part of that network of like-minded pastors and churches to do the same. And so, again, for his name's sake, we do it. Wrap up.
Thank you so much, brother. Got to work on the tears thing. It's a little embarrassing.
It is. It's humbling.
Our people are laughing because I'm the crying pastor here. So Art and I have that in common. Thank you so much. That was so encouraging. Now, Art and Kim's right here. So Kim will be part of the Q&A during the luncheon in 103. So you'll be able to ask questions of Art and Kim during that luncheon, and also hopefully they can maybe stick out around a little bit, or you could come up and talk to them right now about India, about missions, whatnot. We just so appreciate the relationship that we have with Foothill. Just to kind of let you know how the rest of these next 2 Sundays are going to go. So during our service, we'll have a greeting from Sean Ransom, who is in town from the Philippines. So we're excited to hear from him. And then Tim and Tina Carnes are here. They're also going to be part of the Q&A time. And then Tim is preaching a little bit later. So I think he's preaching in Hindi or... Oh? What? Or no, I think it's in English. So we're really excited to have Pastor Tim here. And so that's what's going to be going on today. Next Sunday, we'll have Francis and Tina de Jesus. They're in from the Philippines. They're part of Guiding Light Christian Church, very involved in their missions ministry, but he's studying at the Master's Seminary now. So he's preached here at Cornerstone before. And then Skylar Tucker will be bringing a greeting. And then we'll have Q&A. Actually, we'll have a preaching from Pastor Morris from Pakistan. He's here, but he got his visa. He'll be here. And then we'll also have a Q&A luncheon next week as well. I want to encourage you, if you have not signed up for the luncheon next week, please do so. That helps us know how much food to buy. But anyway, feel free to come on up. And if you have questions for Art and Kim, God bless you guys.